Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fifth session in our spiritual growth campaign entitled Decide to Thrive. My name is Pastor Steve, and I'm excited to be with all of you again. I hope you've been enjoying each one of these lessons. Well, today we're looking at our next decision, and that is the influence decision. You may remember the classic holiday story, A Christmas Carol. Well, Ebenezer Scrooge was a miserable penny pincher. All he cared about was his money. In the end, all that got him was loneliness and misery. You see, Scrooge only found real purpose when he shifted his focus from himself to others. It's a paradox, but it's true. We actually find our lives by giving them away in serving others. That's the life Jesus modeled. And the fact is, in our next decision in this journey, the influence decision, it's the life that we need to live out. The influence decision means choosing to make a difference in the lives of others through our unique gifts, talents, and abilities. In a sense, your unique gifts, talents, and abilities, well, they're a lot like Scrooge's money. His money only found its real purpose when he stopped hoarding it and he discovered the joy in giving it away. Your abilities, the time that you have, they aren't just for you. They're actually for, watch this, serving others and making a difference in this world. When we align our lives with this divine design, something remarkable happens. We find fulfillment through service. Paul understood this principle well. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 7 and 8, he writes, "We were gentle among you, like a nursing mother taking care of her own children. So, being affectionately desirous of you, we were ready to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also our own selves, because you had become very dear to us." Paul wasn't just preaching a message, he was giving himself away. He knew true influence comes through caring for and serving people. He didn't think the titles he held made him special. He didn't lord his spiritual position over the Thessalonian people. Instead, he treated them like his own children. This is the servant leader's playbook. In Mark chapter 10, we witness an interesting interaction. Two brothers, the disciples, James and John, well, they approached Jesus. And they wanted a favor, asking him in Mark chapter 10, verse 37, "Grant us that we may sit, one on your right hand and the other on your left, in your glory." James and John saw power like the world did. Success to them was about titles, position, and prestige. Yet Jesus turned the disagreement into a revolutionary lesson. In Mark chapter 10, verse 43 and 44, he said, "But whoever desires to become great among you shall be your servant. And whoever of you desires to be first shall be slave of all." Jesus flipped the script on everything they thought they knew about influencing others. Then in verse 45, he summed it up this way, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." Imagine how different our world would be if we all adopted a servant mindset. It's not just a nice idea, it's a transformative way of living that changes everything. Now, before you skip this chapter thinking, "I'm not a leader," hear me out. The influence decision isn't about the job title of leader. It's about serving others right where you are with what you have to offer. Missionary statesman J. Oswald Sanders says, "Leadership is influence," in the classic book, Spiritual Leadership. So if leadership is influence, servant leadership is one of the greatest ways to what? Influence people. When we serve others, three amazing things happen. Number one, personal transformation. We grow when we serve others. Our character is shaped. Our perspective broadens. And we discover a deep sense of purpose and joy. Number two, church activation. When believers embrace servant leadership, the church comes alive. Seeing people's lives change is exciting. Number three, community impact. Servant leaders become God's agents of lasting change. From our neighborhoods to our schools to our workplaces and even beyond. Every act of God-inspired service creates a ripple effect. We can define servant leadership this way. A servant leader uses their God-given gifts, talents, and abilities to serve others and influence them for Christ. When we lose ourselves in service to others, we find fulfillment. In John chapter 13, we see Jesus' last night on earth. Tomorrow, he would be crucified, and he knew it. The disciples are gathered for what will be their last meal together before the cross. What did Jesus do? He gets up from the table, takes off his outer clothing, wraps a towel around his waist, then he starts washing his disciples' feet. Foot washing was a lowly task in ancient Israel. People wore open-toed sandals, and there were no paved roads, and it meant lots of dirt and animal waste on their feet. It's not hard to imagine why feet got very dirty back then. And that's why the lowest servant in a household usually did this job. Yet Jesus, despite being the Son of God and King of Kings, he chose to kneel down and to wash his disciples' filthy feet. The Savior stooped to do the work of the lowest servant. In God's family, servant leaders kneel. This moment teaches us 5 powerful lessons about servant leadership. Number 1, serve with love. Jesus knew Judas would betray him. He knew the disciples would soon scatter, yet his love for them was unconditional, agape love, God's unconditional love. It motivated his service. When we serve others, we are doing it out of genuine love. It's powerful. So my question is, when you serve others, are you doing it out of love or for personal recognition? Number 2, confidence empowers others. Jesus in verse 4 rose from supper and laid aside his garments, took a towel, and girded himself. He was secure enough to take on a servant's role. Remember, the insecure are into titles. The secure are into towels. Are you secure enough to serve others sacrificially? Number 3, initiative meets real needs. Jesus saw a practical need, dirty feet, and he met it. No fanfare, no committees, just action. Servant leaders don't wait around. They take initiative. What needs do you see around you that you can meet today? Number 4, courage in the face of rejection. When Jesus came to Peter, he faced resistance. "You shall never wash my feet," Peter exclaimed. But Jesus persisted, knowing this act was crucial. Serving others can be awkward and even be met with rejection at times. Are you willing to push through those uncomfortable moments? Number 5, humility is contagious. Jesus told his disciples in John chapter 13, verse 15, "For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you." His act of service was contagious. When we serve, it inspires others to do the same. Have you experienced this ripple effect in your own life? Jesus didn't just talk about servant leadership. He lived it out in tangible, memorable ways. He showed us true greatness isn't about position or power, but about willingness to serve. So here's a question to ponder. What's your equivalent of foot washing today? Where in your life? Where in your home? Maybe at work, in your community? Can you roll up your sleeves, grab a towel, and serve? Sometimes servant leadership means being the bridge that connects people to their God-given potential. Other times it means championing someone else's dreams. Or it could mean kneeling down to serve in ways that feel beneath us. So what makes a servant leader tick? What qualities set them apart? How do they think and act differently? It's not about perfection, mind you. Even the greatest servant leaders like Jonathan in the Old Testament and Barnabas in the New Testament had their flaws. However, some core characteristics show up again and again. Let's explore a few of them to help us make the influence decision. Here are 3 qualities of servant leaders: gentleness, strength, under control. When you hear gentle leader, what comes to your mind? They're a pushover, someone weak. Well, that's not what we're talking about here. Biblical gentleness is strength, under control. Jesus described himself as gentle and humble in heart in Matthew chapter 11, verse 29. Yet, this is the same Jesus who drove money changers out of the temple and stood up to corrupt religious leaders. His gentleness, it wasn't weakness. It was power channeled for the good of others. Generosity, open hands, open heart. Servant leaders are generous, not just with their money, but with their time, their energy, their knowledge, and opportunities. They operate from an abundance mindset rather than a scarcity mindset. They always seek to add value to others, even at their own expense. Remember the little boy with 5 loaves and 2 fish? He gave what little he had, and Jesus multiplied it and used it to feed thousands. That's the kind of generosity we're talking about. A willingness to offer what we have, trusting God to multiply its impact. Generosity isn't about how much you have. It's about what you do with what you have. A servant leader asks, how can I use what I have to benefit others? Sacrificial living, daily choices, lasting impact. Here's where the rubber meets the road. Servant leadership isn't a one-time decision. It's a series of daily choices to put others before yourself. It's deciding to listen when you'd rather speak. It's staying up late to help a colleague even when you're tired. It's giving up your comfort for someone else's needs. Paul puts it this way in Romans chapter 12, verse 1. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Now, being a living sacrifice doesn't mean acting like a doormat or neglecting self-care. It means consistently choosing to use your life for the benefit of others and the glory of God. Remember Jesus washing his disciples' feet? That was his towel moment. It was a practical, humble act of service that spoke volumes. Your towel moment might look different, but the principle is the same. Perhaps it's at home or at the office, at school, in your community, or at your church. Be intentional. Maybe you're a busy manager at work and your towel moment could be making coffee for your team or staying late to help a new employee. Perhaps you're a stay-at-home parent. Your towel moment might be volunteering at your child's school or organizing a neighborhood cleanup. The key is to look for practical ways to serve that might be, quote, beneath your perceived status. It's in those moments you have the opportunity to flip the script on what leadership looks like. So we've journeyed through the heart of servant leadership, learning from the life of Jesus. Now it's time to make the influence decision for yourself. Every time you decide to serve, encourage, and put others first, you grow as a servant leader and lead a thriving life. You're making a difference, whether you see it or not. As we wrap up, let's revisit our definition. A servant leader uses their God-given gifts, talents, and abilities to serve others and influence them for Christ. That's the heartbeat of the influence decision. It's about recognizing your gifts, your position, your relationships. They're all opportunities that God's given you to what? To serve and to point others to Jesus. I can't wait to hear how your small group is going. I've heard great stories so far. Now, as we approach the end of this study, why not start planning right now, talking about what study you guys could do next after this series. I'll see you guys next session where we look at our final decision, the generosity decision. Enjoy your discussion. God bless. I'll see you next week.